more flights and 35 million passengers a year. In the past half an hour, it's been announced that Heathrow is to get its controversial third runway. Business leaders have welcomed the plan, which will create thousands of jobs and generate billions of pounds for the economy. But there is a price. Environmentalists say it will mean more pollution, and for locals, one whole village of 700 homes will be bulldozed to make way for the runway and new terminal. Well, our transport correspondent Tom Simons is at Heathrow with reaction for us. Tom.
Yes, the government has taken several years to reach this decision, one of possibly its most difficult. The Transport Secretary, Jeff Hume, stood up in the Commons less than an hour ago and said the runway would go ahead. He said he'd looked at all the environmental considerations for air quality, for air emissions, carbon emissions, and for noise, and that he decided that the runway wouldn't reach those conditions. Now, it's a big decision, there's lots of detail in it, and we'll take you through that in a minute. But let's first go across the airport from here to the area just beyond the runways you can see, to Sipson and Harmondsworth, the two villages that are going to be obliterated partly by this runway. Louisa Baldini is there.
Tom, thanks very much. Yes, years of uncertainty are finally over for the village of Sipson here, but of course it is not the result that the residents here would have wanted. This village lies right on Heathrow's doorstep. You can even see the radar tower there in the distance. Hundreds of acres of greenbelt land would be swallowed up for a third runway. 700 homes would also be demolished. This primary school, which has been on site for over 40 years, would also have to go. Some 320 pupils would have to find new schools. Now, many of the residents whom I've spoken to here have lived here all their lives. They are not so much as sad today as angry. They say that the battle will continue. Now, of course, Sipson may be razed to the ground, but there are several other villages around here, Harmondsworth that you mentioned, Tom, just down the road. Those will remain, but of course they will be even closer to the expanded Heathrow, with all the detriments that that will add.
So let's take a closer look at some of the issues raised by today's pretty considerable announcement from the government. It'll be 10 years before this runway is built, and environmentalists have said they'll fight it every step of the way. This is the view from Heathrow's new control tower. One thing everyone agrees on is that the airport can barely cope with the 480,000 flights it handles a year. The two runways have no more takeoff slots, and so to today's announcement.
Heathrow is now operating at around 99% of its maximum capacity, leading to delays and constraints on future economic growth. Heathrow is already losing ground to international hub airports in other competitive countries. Mr. Speaker, the government remains convinced, therefore, that additional capacity at Heathrow is critical to this country's long-term economic prosperity.
Runway 3 and Terminal 6 will be built to the north of the airport, a massive area of development. Construction starts in 2015, and today's announcement means this village, Harmondsworth, will be almost surrounded by the airport, while despite protests, this one, Sipson, will go altogether. That's 700 homes and businesses like this hairdresser's.
For when I lose my home, obviously I lose my business, and obviously the community. My grandfather lives here, you know, he was born here, all my family were born here, so it's going to be a very difficult day today, I think.
I like the place and I like my home, so I'm against it really, because I should be put out to God knows where.
But the aviation industry says if it hadn't got the runway, passengers would have started flying out of rival airports, connecting to long-haul flights via Paris, Frankfurt or Amsterdam. Poor international transport links would have damaged the economy.
We have nearly 20% less destinations that you can fly to from this airport than you could have done 10 years ago. That process will continue unless we actually get extra runway capacity, in the same way that other major European airports have been adding runways.
It's emerged rebel ministers have forced the government to accept what it said today were the toughest rules in the world for reducing airport emissions. airlines will have to use the newest planes on their new runway. For example, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, yet to fly, is 20% more efficient than the Boeing 767, while the giant Airbus A380 produces 17% less CO2 than the current Boeing jumbo jet, the 747. Heathrow will have to cut its carbon emissions by 2050 to 2005 levels. Environmentalists don't believe it's possible.
Well, I'm afraid that there's no such thing as a green airport in this case. At the heart of this issue is climate change, and while we can tackle climate change, we certainly can't do that if we double the size of what's already one of the most polluting airports in the world.
Today's announcement also included the expected vision of a new fast rail link from London, stopping at a new Heathrow hub station north of the airport and heading to the Midlands and the north of England. A new company, High Speed 2, is being set up to build it. So what happens now? Well, if you'll pardon the pun, we're in for the long haul. What happens now is there's likely to be a legal challenge by opponents of the third runway, and then a planning inquiry under the new planning laws that were introduced at the end of last year. Only then in 2015 do the diggers and bulldozers start to move in, and the runway itself doesn't open until 2019 at the earliest. Kate.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's speak to our political correspondent Gary Donoghue, who's at Downing Street. And before all of that, then, Gary, let's deal with the politics of